So if I met you at a party, maybe a party like that one, and I asked you the question, who are you? How would you respond? Well, if you're like me, the first thing you say, maybe not to the person, but you think it is, I hate that question. I hate that question. The reason I hate that question is because if I'm honest, I'm still trying to answer it. Identity shapes everything else in your life. How you answer the question, who are you, impacts every relationship you're in right now. It impacts the direction of your life. It impacts your relationship with money. It impacts your relationship with power. And it impacts your relationship with God. I'm excited about the next 4 weeks because I feel like it's an expanding of the conversation and a journey that I've been on for some time now about identity. What is my core identity? You know, what I realized is there are these incongruencies in my life. If you were to ask me that question, not to sound hyper-religious, but there's a part of me that intellectually says, oh, my core identity is I'm a child of God, that I'm in relationship with God and I can take worth and I can take value there. There's a difference between knowing this stuff and believing it. See, because I could tell you all places in the Bible that talk about me being God's child. I can tell you all the verses and quote them to you about what it means to be a treasured child of God, but I wasn't believing it because I wasn't living that way. And if you're not familiar with that part of the Bible, let me just show you the stuff that I knew. Because, you know, it's easy to look at the Bible and say, at the end of the day, this book is really all about hell avoidance. This is about hell avoidance, and that's what the Bible's all about. You know, it's easy to look at it and perhaps say, well, maybe it's not about hell avoidance. It's really about performance management. So I do these things and God likes me. I do these things and God rewards me. And I've often approached the Bible that way. But what I'm learning over and over again in my life is that this book is not about hell avoidance, although that talks about that. It's not about performance management, although there are some things that God calls us to be and do. But the biggest theme of the Bible is this is a family story. God is a father who is desperately fighting to regain custody of his children. It's a family story. And this is the family you come from. And God is calling your name. And yet, even though he's calling our name, we can reject it and we can resist it. See, the goal for God is not hell avoidance. God's goal for your life is not performance management. God's goal for you is beautifully written about in Romans 8:15, where it says, so you have not received a spirit that makes you fearful slaves. Instead, you received God's spirit when he adopted you. So the series premise is this: there is a place at the table for you. God has a place at the table that he is extending to all of us, and the place at the table is that of a treasured child. And yet, we can either choose to reject it, or we can do something that actually is more insidious and even worse in some ways, and this is what I did for a long time, is we can intellectually believe that, but we can live our lives as if it's not true. There is a place at the table for you. In fact, God's vision for us is this. God's vision is that our identity as a treasured child so eclipses every other identity, every counterfeit affection in our life, that it is the place from which we live. My challenge to you over this series is engage honestly in this series. It won't be comfortable all the time, but there is a freedom on the other side of this that God wants for you. God did not send Jesus. Jesus did not die so that you could cope with being an orphan. Jesus came so that you could belong and thrive in a loving family.